Righto, I'm just going to start before we jump into the presentation, just this recording that's come from the CEO, and really it was about why we needed the audio.
Gladstone Regional Council's role is to provide facilities and services for our community to function well. To do this responsibly and effectively, we must deliver the best value for our ratepayers' money. The process that leads Council to make investment decisions about how we spend that money on changing or introducing new services to the community needs a framework to guide us. That's why Council has adopted an investment decision framework to help guide the decisions we make. The process involves working in phases, getting approval for that work, and then moving through a gate or a checkpoint to complete the next piece of work, whether we're providing a community asset like the Phillip Street Communities and Families Precinct, improving our daily operations to work more efficiently, or staging an event at the Botanic Gardens like Luminous to entertain the community. The investment decision framework will impact everyone and help us to make the best decisions.
If I can ask you, and I'll show you now while we're here, this video, if you go to the connected site, so this is the home page, if you then go up to our council at the top there, we have a framework site, so it's a standalone site, which is where we're intending to put all our different frameworks and systems and links in there. You can then go to the investment decision framework, and that video that I just tried to show sits on there. And then also there's a second video that I was going to show today, but we will have the same sound issues, so I'll figure out if I can figure what I've done different this time. So that's where everything we talk about today will exist on this site, and we're setting it up as the go-to place.
It's also made of personal training, IDF personal training. So that's the
correct. So yeah, so there's all the links to this training, the slides, and then obviously all the documents and artifacts that are part of IDF will all sit in here, and a number of different ways you can get to it depending on how you want to view it or what you're doing. So there is an Elmo course as well through the online training, which you would have all been sent a link to also do, which gives the really fundamental base stuff. So apologies if you have done that and you find double ups in this. Okay, well that was a good start. Righto, so what will be covered today, there is a lot in this, but we've tried to break it down in a really simplistic way to help get what you need for the different aspects of the different phases you're in, or what you're coming to the IDF to do. So a bit of an overview to start with, how we're implementing some of the roles and responsibilities, our investment categories. We'll go into a bit of a deep dive of all the phases and gates with some examples. Capital project change request, so it's coming out of the project management framework and how that links into the IDF and how it is intended to be seamless. The capital portfolio overview, how that all links in, our maintenance management framework, stakeholder engagement, cost estimating, approvals, so the different types of approvals we now have and what we're changing. Tech 1 IPP, so how do you find the information in this software that we use, and what are the future actions that this piece of work that we're implementing now hasn't achieved or wasn't intended to achieve either, and what we're doing with that. Okay, so why we have IDF? There's lots of different reasons, and it is trying to do lots of different things. So in essence, the big words that jump out is about prudency and efficiency of our spend and our investments. We're including stakeholders with risk-based decision making. We actually have decision gates, so we're holding at particular points. We're acting on our strategic direction, not just building and doing whatever. We're prioritising, we're considering whole of life costs, not just the upfront capital. We're justifying our investments and we're considering them from start to end. Today's session is going to be focused heavily on capital. The IDF, so Investment Decision Framework, is also very much the policy and corporate standard established to cover operational investments as well. But this rollout is focused on the capital straight up. So there'll be another, and I'll talk a bit more about that. So what is IDF? Often if you ask people in the business, people think that this picture is solely IDF. It certainly is a very good picture explaining it, but there's a lot more depth to what IDF is. So the whole framework consists of the policy, the corporate standard, which has our governance and business rules, and then we've got the IDF business manual, which then links out to a whole lot of procedures, tools, templates. So what we're delivering and implementing is the whole suite. I will say that there's been a very conscious rule applied, I guess, and you've probably heard me say it before in conversations, that this is an 80-20 rule is applied. So we're making this work and it will work for 80% of the time, maybe more. But that other 20%, if it's not working for you and something's not quite being able to apply, then let's escalate it up and we can sort out whether we need to change or tweak something, or whether it's just an anomaly that we don't actually deal with often, so we can let it figure out and let it go through. So the CEO often says progress over perfection, and so that very much was channeled here to allow us to start using it and then we can refine from there. Okay, so how do we apply IDF? IDF in its simplistic form is just a series of phases where we do work and gates where we get a decision to proceed to the next phase or not, potentially. When you look at, and I just pulled together this slide with all the different layers of different things that the phases are doing and what we're looking at. So in the front end of the phases, we're very much looking at, are we making the right investment? We're establishing that prudency of the investment. And on the technical front, we're just considering the investment opportunity. What is it that we're being presented here with? When you start to get to the middle phases, so that select and define, it's when you then start to kick into, well, are we now doing the investment right? So rather than what is it we're doing, are we doing it right? We then start to manage these investments through the project management framework. And we then also managing that budget around that capital portfolio, or using the capital portfolio. And in this middle phases, we're really investigating those specifications. So what is the detail to this investment? Then when we move on into execute, so we start to build it, we then start to turn our head around making sure we're ensuring that efficiency of the spend, we're still delivering the investment right. We're then starting to look at how we're going to manage and maintain this thing when it's built. So we're not doing that once it's built, we start that before. And we're very much into that mode of delivering the investment. So there's lots of different layers we're looking at here when we're doing it. So what's the end goal? And this is in a really simplistic view, But we have here at council, we have a 10-year long-term capital plan, and it's what currently sits in, you'll hear me refer to IPP. It's our financial system, so Tech 1, and it's just a register that sits in Tech 1. So there's 10-year worth of capital investments in there. We then bring it down to our 3-year capital portfolio. Exactly the same projects sit in both. The difference with the 3 years is we then start to get in a lot more detail about how we're going to deliver these projects in that 3 year. What's the resource? We start getting into a monthly capital expenditure and income on each of these projects, whereas the 10 years just the yearly expenditure. Then the next level down is we then use that 3-year capital portfolio to every year we get a snapshot in time of what we forecast that budget that we will need, and we get that adopted by council. So just today we've had adopted the 21-22 budget. And the process it went through is we looked at the capital portfolio and we adopt a 1+2 years. So 1 year is really detailed. So in the next year, what do we need? And we then also know from our capital portfolio what is that year 2 and year 3 look like. It's not as detailed. And certainly as we get more mature in that capital portfolio space, we'll get more detailed in what we're presenting up for budget we're seeking. And then at the lowest level, we have individual capital investments. So we're making decisions around those individual validity of those projects and proceeding through or not. So the end goal is basically having each of those different layers working seamlessly, and we've got the right detail in the right layer to make these decisions around these individual, and the individual decisions then feeding back up into those portfolios. So it is about, I guess, this, and there's different words in the business, whether they're plans or portfolios or pipelines of work, but it's about having programs that we can afford, we can deliver, and that we need to do. And certainly IDF is going to allow us to start that journey of getting more mature in that space, of being really clear on what those programs are that we need to do. So let's implement IDF. From 1st of July this year, so in 2 weeks' time, all capital investments are required to progress through the IDF framework, or the IDF, from their current phase. So we're not making everything go back. We're currently, I've just done an exercise of mapping all the current projects or investments that sit in IPP and worked out what phase they're currently in, so you'll take them forward. There is I guess a disclaimer around that, is we understand that some of the information we require under the IDF won't be available on all those projects, and we're also looking at how we fix that up to make sure that all that back work, we can fill in the gaps basically. And I'll talk a little bit more about that down the track. So from 1 July, a project or work will commence in the 21-22 financial year to align operational investments to the IDF. So Sarah Hunter in the strategic business planning, or manager of strategic business planning, she's leading that piece of work, and that's already actually started, of about how we align that and what that looks like. So, and definitely progress over perfection. 80-20 rule, again, if you find this is not working, if you take one thing away from today, that is that it won't be perfect, and if you have a problem, come and ask the question so we've got the chance to refine and fix it up and help you. And certainly please just don't push it to the side and say it's not working, I'm not going to use it. So why are you here? You have been identified as an end user. We did a really detailed training needs analysis, and and you are someone we've identified that will need to, will be either a project manager, a proponent, or you'll be feeding into this process in a way and need to be aware of what's going on. So up here, I guess, is a list, or it just identifies all the roles that exist in the IDF, and I'll just quickly touch on them. So there could be people who are appointing a sponsor, which is typically CEO or GM. We will have line managers who will be involved in decision making in Gate 0. We have the sponsor themselves, which is typically the decision maker at these gates. We have the Investment Opportunity Committee, so IOC, and they're there for the more complicated projects or the complex projects, and they do a review and provide a recommendation to the sponsor before the sponsor makes a decision. There's people, so the sponsor can also appoint a sponsor's rep. We then have proponent, which is, I guess, the person doing the work in the front phases. We have a project manager, so the proponent hands over to a project manager partway after that Gate 2 decision. And then we have stakeholders, and stakeholders are very important right from the start to an end of a project, and being really, really clear that we're identifying and then actually talking and engaging with them.
Can I interrupt what you talk?
Pardon?
Can I interrupt what you
talk? Yep. Any questions, interrupt me anytime.
Yes, sir. I think in the beginning, I remember you had a document about the IDF. These roles then defined in that document.
Correct. So these roles are defined particularly in the corporate standard, and a list of their roles and responsibility are in there. In the business manual, so the IDF business manual, there's also a full RACI for all the different steps in the process we go through that then break it down even further in a bit more detail than just these roles of who's responsible, accountable, needs to be communicated to and informed, or consulted and informed. So just as an overview, this is where the roles have a role, I guess, or a place in terms of those phases and gates. So up front in the established, so this is where we've just all of a sudden we've thought of something and we've got either an opportunity or a problem or a need. So in this first area, the decision makers are represented at the top here, and then this next line down is the person who's really leading the work to go through in the phase. So in the actual phase, so the proponent starts with it. So if I have an idea, then I would be the proponent, and then I go to the line manager who's the gate approval. And then the delegated officer, so it's just the person who's assigning the sponsor and setting up that governance on this investment after the line manager has said, yeah, we think this is an idea we need to actually address. From that point on, the sponsor then takes over the decision making through all the gates, as well as the sponsor rep is involved. They can have all the delegations of the sponsor except for the actual decision-making power. So that would still need to go up to the sponsor. And that's probably, we've introduced that role. It is a new role in this business that we haven't had prior to IDF. We've had sponsor. It's been around for 18 months or so now. But the sponsor representative was brought in really around a workload balancing thing, particularly in the asset space. It typically works out that Niels's position and my position tend to be majority of the sponsors for our asset stuff out of asset management plans, which is majority of the capital. And so by virtue of that, loading us up with these projects was going to cause a bit of a bottleneck. So that's where we brought in this idea of sponsors rep and alleviating some of that load. We then have the Investment Opportunity Committee who are involved in gate 1, 2 and 6, but they're not involved for all projects. So who's considered a delegated officer? It will, under the delegations, it is considered the whoever is the responsible area, if I can say that. So if it's I guess an asset, it's typically going to be Mark Francis as the asset manager who's assigning it, but there might be some capital projects that are of, say, an ICT nature, which might then mean it'd go up to Carly Quinn. It could be a strategic, so in a strategic project in Ericsson's world, which again, that might be Carly Quinn as the relevant GM. So it's kind of who's the line relevant GM. So after gate 2, the proponent goes on to the project manager, and then we have stakeholders who exist the whole way through. Okay, so the Investment Opportunity Committee, this is established in the policy, so this was something that has been around from very early on. They are a peer review function, so they don't have any decision rights. They're compulsory for significant investments, and we'll talk shortly about, we've got 4 different categories of investment, and the significant is the most complex, I guess, of what we do. The IOC is then optional for advanced, standard and urgent, and they're only relevant in gate 1, 2 and 6, so they're not in all gates. They are there to give an extra level of rigour and prudency around when we're considering whether these investments should pass, and so and really they're there to support the sponsors and council if council ends up being the decision maker. The people listed there are the current members. They've just been renewed for 2 years under the terms of reference, so they, and obviously will be replaced if for whatever reason they move out, but otherwise they'll get replaced after 2 years. Something I haven't mentioned, and I probably should have mentioned it on the last slide, is that council may be the decision maker of some of these gates. So what I showed before was typically what will happen. There, at any single gate, council may make a resolution to say they want to be the decision maker, but it'll be by resolution. And I'll show you some examples of that. But for majority of what we do, they're not involved. It's really that sponsor making that decision as we go through.
Sorry, Salisa, just have one quick question.
Yep.
So is that the positions or the people that are part of that Investment Opportunity Commission? The reason I ask that is because Chris has now gone across to waste. So would that now be Ali in that group?
No, it's people. So who can, good question, Jane. Who can be a part of this? It can be any level 3 manager or specialist. And so it was seen as an opportunity to get cross-functional views on these investments, and it wasn't set up to be specific positions. So the idea is that it could be anyone across the business. Obviously there's a bit of the right mix we want to get all different aspects, but yeah, it's people. So Chris is staying on as manager of waste.
Oh, that's cool. Well, you'll have an operational in there as well, so that's excellent.
Yep. So as I've said already, you very much are supported. We've made a massive, I guess, intentional effort to make sure that this material is available and easily accessible. As I showed you, the IDF connected page is where I would say is your first point to go to if you're looking for anything or needing information, and then it'll help you get to wherever you need to go. I don't think I'll try that second video. Hang on, let me jump out and I want to try one thing and see if I can get this next video to play.
We must consider two broad questions when we're investing public money. Are we making the right investment? And are we doing the investment right? The investment decision framework guides us to consider the investment opportunity, investigate the investment specifications, and deliver the investment. It's important to know what an investment is. It is when we use resources to change the existing level of service, improve the delivery of an internal or external service, or create a new service. An investment can be classed as capital or operational. Capital investments include acquiring, constructing, upgrading, replacing, renewing, or disposing of assets. Operational investments include changing a service we provide or offering a new service. So let's look at the phases of work and decision gates in the IDF. First, we need to identify opportunities, ideas, problems, or needs. We'll use the internal Project Planning Register in Tech 1, known as IPP, to establish these. You'll be asked to do an investment opportunity brief outlining your vision, key drivers, and whether your proposal aligns with Council's corporate plan or asset management plans. At Gate 0, your line manager will decide if the investment will continue. If the project is approved, the delegated officer will appoint a sponsor and decide if the Investment Opportunity Committee gets involved. The next phase identifies what is being asked and why. If an investment reaches this point, the proponent must build on the information from the established phase and start a business case. Key stakeholders should be identified and a problem statement or opportunity statement prepared, including why we should be doing something about it. IPP is used to capture the information and allow the sponsor to make the decision at Gate 1. The assess phase takes a broader look to understand all the possible options to solve the problem or deliver the opportunity. The proponent, along with stakeholders, now develop the business case in the IPP. This phase requires work on whole-of-life costs, benefits analysis, and risk assessment, with enough supporting information for the proponent to identify a recommended option. The sponsor will be the decision maker at Gate 2, assessing the completed business case. They may ask for more information before deciding. On approval, the responsibility passes from the proponent to an appointed project manager.
At the start of the select phase is also when the investment enters the project management framework to manage the delivery. Work undertaken in this phase aims to evaluate the best, most achievable option or options. The business case will be updated as the concept of the project is delivered to identify the optimum solution. The sponsor is the decision maker at Gate 3 and will decide if the optimum solution has been selected. The define phase prepares to lock in an investment, and the project manager must ensure everything is in place for success. Detailed development of the identified solution happens here. Execution planning involves stakeholders taking place, including updating the business case, whole-of-life cost, risk management plans, and proposed delivery model. Gate 4 is typically the final investment decision, and the sponsor is responsible for deciding if the necessary work has been completed in readiness to execute the investment.
The execute phase delivers the investment, constructs the asset, or delivers the new service or change. The project manager ensures stakeholders are involved and informed as required, and the investment is completed, commissioned, and operating. For capital asset investments, the asset must enter the maintenance management framework during the execute phase. The sponsor is the decision maker at Gate 5 on whether an investment has been fully delivered, commissioned, and operating. The close phase assesses what's been learned and captures all investment information in Council's system. Gate 6 is the final gate, and the sponsor decides if all the closeout work has been fully completed. In the operate and maintain phase, the investment is now with the service manager and provider. The investment is now considered part of their business as usual services.
Okay, so there are 4 investment categories. So every single investment that goes through this it will fall into one of these 4. We have standard, advanced, significant, and urgent. So if I start with standard, and this is a picture of the new bridge we just built at Tundoon Botanical Gardens. It's a pedestrian bridge. And it's an example of our standard. It is well, I had 70, but I've done the numbers now. It's closer. We have 85% of our capital program in that 10-year plan, IPP. It falls in this standard bucket. They are things that we deliver often. So year on year, we might do things like this, which certainly pedestrian bridges or even bridge replacements and work like that is what we do. Footpaths and those is the core, I guess, of what we do often. They have a low complexity and they are things that we're very comfortable with. So the advanced area, and this is a picture of Cell 3A at Benarabi landfill that's just been completed. They're things that, and it's about 10 to 15% or 10% of what we do is the actual numbers. They're a little bit more complex, so they're that medium complexity, and they're often delivered in the industry, but we don't often deliver them ourselves. So we don't deliver a landfill cell every year, but we do deliver them, and they are delivered quite often in the industry as a general. We then have significant projects, and these are around 3% in our portfolio, or quantity, not dollar numbers, certainly quantity. They are our high complexity projects, and we don't often deliver them. We probably never delivered them before, and they're not things that are typically delivered often in the industry either. And this picture here of our Phillip Street community precinct that we're just finishing at the moment. So then you have the final category, which is urgent and is around that 2% of what we do if you're adding up the numbers, or if I got to 100%. And this picture is of the Auckland Hill landslip. So these are things that are not planned in our program. They pop up because of a failure or a safety incident or an audit, and they're the things that we have been risk assessed to have to do work immediately on them. I will put out there, these urgent projects, we have in some situations investments that we make where we have to do them absolutely immediately. They don't need design, they just have to be done. So a broken water main, we're not going to bring through this. It's urgent, obviously, and I would say it's probably critical, but those types of work that we have to do to restore a service immediately is not what we're trying to capture here. What we're trying to capture is those urgent work that we have to do but need a level of scrutiny and design and project management over them. We'll show you shortly that we've set these up so that they get fast-tracked through the IDF. We're not trying to hold them up, we're just making sure they've got the right decisions, because some of these have big price tags that come with them. So whilst they're urgent, we still need to make sure we're being prudent and efficient with what we're doing. So it's not open slather on, it's just easier. So we've developed a investment complexity assessment, and it's really basic and it's just a guide. We've got a lot of feedback through consultation around, well, how do I know what my investment falls in, which category? So all this is down the left-hand side, there's all these elements of complexity, and then across the top, we're just describing, I guess, what a low, medium, high complexity for that element might look like. So how you use this is as simple as just look across, and for each element, just select whether your investment, you think it's that low, medium or high level. Once you get down to the bottom, you just count up what your tally is for each column, and the majority, that say you've got the majority falls in the median, then you know you're most likely aligned to that advanced category. So there's nothing complicated about this. It's just a really simple guide to help us determine where it falls. Because we acknowledged very early that some of these investments might be, say, really high cost, but it's something that we deliver in the industry often, and it's really clear the scope. We haven't got many stakeholders, so it actually can fall into that advanced category. So you might only have one element that sits in the high, the rest is back in that medium. So that is a standalone, just one page document, assessment tool that is on the connected site, or will be very shortly if it's not up there already. So when we talk about these categories, and I talked before about the pathways, so advanced and significant investments go through every single gate. They need a decision, a formal decision at every gate. For standard, it needs to do all the phase work for every phase, but it doesn't need a formal decision at gate 1. So you can just progress, do the work for the phase, but then progress straight on to that next phase and then go for your formal decision at gate 2. For urgent stuff, you don't have to get a formal decision at gate 1 and gate 2. And for gate 0 decision, you can do that in parallel to that phase work leading into gate 3. So what I mean by that is, and in practical terms, what happens is we have asset failure of some sort comes into the EAS team. The engineers start doing their technical investigation, and in parallel to that, we do the paperwork around setting up projects and the governance, so who's the sponsor on this and what's the issue we're actually dealing with. So it's a bit more of the setting up the project governance in parallel. So I won't do a deep dive into the delegations other than just to give you a bit of an idea that there are 5 delegations that sit behind this, and this was one of the issues, or one of the things we very quickly worked out, that if we didn't make clear who's making these gate decisions, then everything would slow down. So there is 5 new delegations that sit in the administrative delegations register. So the first one is power to decide if and when the investment proceeds through decision gate 0, and that is line managers. So if you have an idea, you go to your line manager and they have the power to say, yes, we should spend some time on this or not. The next one is power to decide if and when investments proceed through the IDF decision gate. So this is all the gates, and that's the sponsor. So typically you won't know your sponsor at gate 0, and hence why we brought in that first delegations, but sometimes you will know who your sponsor is, and if you do, then they'll decide gate 0. Power to approve change requests under the project management framework. So this is particularly from after gate 2 decision onwards. So once we have a business case at gate 2, the only way to change that business case is through change requests, which the sponsor decides. Yep, so the line manager can be the sponsor. They may be the same person. The only thing that you can't have happen is the proponent or the project manager can't also be the sponsor. So the line manager and sponsor might be the same person, but then that line manager sponsor can't be the same as the proponent.
Just for clarification,
yep.
The change request, what would be an example of that?
Yep, so it might be that we're in concept design and the estimate that we had in the business case, we found rock, or we've done some whatever, and we now need an extra $500,000 for this project. So that would be an example of a change request, but it could be anything from time, scope, cost. There's a whole range of elements, but we'll get to that. We go into that change request in a bit more detail. The next one is power to appoint sponsors for significant investments. So the CEO is the only one that can appoint a sponsor. So the first three was about who's making decisions. The next two are about who can appoint people into these roles. So for significant investments, so remember that's our 3% of what we do. The CEO is going to appoint those sponsors, sponsor or sponsors, it could be multiple. And then the GM, or down to it could be CEO or GM, will be appointing sponsors for the rest of them. Okay, so I'm going to now do a bit more of a deeper dive into each of the gates and just show you some, or show an example as we go through it. We've used a new water reservoir as our example project, and as we step through each phase and gate, just explaining what it is in that phase and gate we're doing, and what are the documents that we're filling out, and how does that actually happen, that approval of who's doing it. So we've assumed that this new water reservoir, well, not assumed, we've done our little tool and we've decided that our new water reservoir out at Calliope here is an advanced investment. And this example I'm going to work through is actually a real case we've got. We've just done our Lake Awonga water modelling, and this example is one that's come out of that. So I'm going to use this graphic and I'm going to sort of delete a fair bit out of it and we'll build it up as we go through. But what I just wanted to show here, I guess, is a good, when we talked about those delegations, when you put it into practice, what it means is that Gate Zero's line manager, and then the rest of it is the decision at the gates is the sponsor. There is some limitations and conditions on those delegations that's written that I didn't share before. And one particular one was around a risk we identified earlier on, that potentially you could have one single person, a level 3 manager, I should say, making a decision on, say, this water reservoir the whole way through, and no one else see it. So what we brought in is where we have the final investment decision, it actually has to be elevated up to a GM of that relevant area for that decision, rather if it's a level 3 manager, that's the sponsor. And that's what you see in that picture. So, just before I move on, something that is, because we didn't get to see that video, I just want to make sure I appreciate that some people are seeing this for the first time today. And I just wanted to give a really base understanding of what happens in each of these phases. So these first 3 phases, so establish, identify and assess, are the phases where you're building your business case. So you're starting with what is the opportunity, idea, problem in establish. You're then fleshing out what your problem or opportunity statement is, and it's not just what is it, why. Let's justify why we actually need to solve it or address it or take up the opportunity. And then the assess phase is doing your full business case then on that. So it's looking at all your options and looking really wide. From this point on, we then have consider a project. So this is where our project management framework starts. It enters the capital portfolio if it's due to start in the next 3 years. And so select is all about that concept development. So your concept design will typically happen in here. Define is your detail development. And so it's not only about the technical side, so the concept design and detailed design, but it's also about starting your project management plan. What's your delivery approach? You start thinking about that in select. And then define is what's your detail execution plan? How are we going to actually execute this? So there's two layers, technical and then that project management element. Execute is constructing or implementing, and then close is where we're doing all our lessons learned, assess our benefits and close the project. So just wanted to give that overview. Another key thing is at this gate 5, this is where the asset is live from a capital perspective. So everything, and this is why the maintenance management framework needs to kick in its execute. So we're ready to operate and maintain it from gate 5, and then we just tidy the project in the close. And then obviously we go into this operate and maintain, which is our business as usual operation. Okay, so in the establish phase, so gate 0, this is, and I've just got on each of these slides, just so you know what to expect, there's a bit of a step guide of how this actually rolls out. And then I'll jump over to an example where we've filled it out for the water reservoir. So the proponent fills in the investment opportunities brief template. So that's a template. They then, and they'll talk to whoever they need to talk to fill that out. They present it to the line manager makes a decision. It then goes, the decision is approved, which typically in all these gates, there's 4 decisions that can be made. So it's approved and proceed to the next phase. Approved, great idea, but hold. We don't have resources to do anything on this right now. Not approved. You know, it doesn't align with our corporate intent. It's just not something we can facilitate. Or I need more information. I don't actually have enough to make a decision. So it goes to once it's approved to go to the next phase, it then goes to the CEO or GM to appoint the sponsor and identify if the IOC is required, and then it goes to the sponsor to appoint a rep if they want to have a rep. Okay, so if we have, using our example, so this is our new water reservoir, and I'll just jump out quickly to show you the investment brief. So this form is pretty straightforward. So you've got your category, you've got to identify where the source or driver, where is it coming from. You need to be really clear if there's a CSR or resolution driving it. The key roles, so identifying the proponent and the line manager. So this case, we've just used Danielle and myself. For this reservoir, we've got some details about where this is, this idea. And then we put some in background. So this one, we're just putting in a bit of background about it's come from that Lake Awonga modelling. The current situation, so we put in a bit of a summary to say that from a capacity perspective, we need more storage out at Calliope by 2041, but we also did a resilient assessment which identified we can't actually take the current reservoir offline. So if we ever have a contamination issue or anything at that existing reservoir, we would put a couple of hundred houses out of water by taking it offline. So what's the vision? We want to be able to reliably continue to service water past 2041 and be able to deal with growth as well as unplanned outages. So for our asset stuff, the vision is quite simply, we've just got to provide water. We've got no choice. We have to do it under legislation. So resourcing, we're saying that asset planning has the capability in-house. It's part of our BAU to do these business cases. So we'll do it ourselves and we don't need any particular additional costs. And there's some attachments. So it's as simple as that, the form. And then there's a whole series of gate approvals. We can then capture who the sponsor is. So we'll go to the delegated officer and we can capture all that information. And I'll talk about the gate mechanics and how this will look because there's a 2-step phase. So is there a review process to continue investments that are approved but on hold? The short answer is yes, there will be. Have we developed it yet? No, I'll be honest, but it's coming. Okay, so in terms of the example, the mechanics, so we have done the investment opportunity brief for the reservoir. We go to the line manager, which was myself in this example. Danielle brought it to me, and I've given approval, and we're moving on to the identify phase. So we're going into what is the actual problem we're trying to solve. So the key steps, so the proponent is going to complete the stakeholder engagement plan and engage with stakeholders. This engagement plan is mandatory under the IDF, and that is a big change from where we've been in the past. We've never had to do it, so that is a change. There's a template for that engagement plan, and I'll talk about it a bit further down, but why we've introduced that is every pain point or story I got told through consultation, if you broke down the cause of that, it come back to that the stakeholders weren't engaged with early enough, or weren't engaged well enough, or weren't engaged at all. So hence the drive to push this. We just need to talk to each other. So we complete, the proponent is then going to complete the business case, the first part of it, which is the problem statement. Once they've completed that, it goes off to the IOC if it's a significant or being required, and they fill in the gate 1 checklist. So from gate 1 onwards, there's a checklist for every gate, and it's just a series of questions to make sure the checks and balances that we've done what we needed to in the phase. The IOC makes a recommendation, then the sponsor gets it and either reviews what the IOC has answered in that checklist, or they complete the checklist themselves, and then they make the decision. So if we build on this example, you'll see as I've opened this form that these fields here are all the same, and it's because we're building on that investment opportunity brief and we're just adding more fields to it. So all these fields at the front were the same, and then we start to bring in a little bit more of cost centres applicable, which there's people that will help us fill that in if you're not sure of what that is. We just need that in the system when it comes to budgeting. So asset category, are we new, renewal, upgrade, disposal, other? Potentially it might be new, but a component, a component. Scotty Rouse has just come in with his little baby.
Nice.
So if we have a new project, we may have an element of disposal in that, which further down will capture if there's disposable in it. So disposal you'd only tick if it was 100% disposal. All we were doing is disposing an asset. The asset group, I'll just skip through. A lot of this is self-explanatory. We've got a procedure that we're writing that gives you a lot more help with how to answer these, because some of them are just select fields. So again, we know who our key roles are, and all this is the same, background's the same. By all means, if you've got more to add into these, because you now know more, then you are able to update them. The point of it is that you're building on the business case, you're building this as you go through. So for this particular example, we've said that our opportunity or problem is that the Mount Elizabeth zone requires an extra 0.2 meg of additional storage at 2041, and at ultimate needs 11 meg more for that ultimate of Calliope. So we need more storage. Additionally, on top of that, part of our problem is that we can't take the existing reservoir, Mount Elizabeth, offline without putting 200-300 homes and businesses either out of water or at a really reduced service level, and talking like a trickle of water to their taps. So that's our problem. And I guess the why around that is that under the legislation, we've got to deliver water to these people. We can't just choose not to. So risk rating information, I won't go into too much more detail, but we've got to identify target outcomes. So what do we want to achieve by solving this problem? What's the benefits? What's the tangible things we can measure if we do solve this problem? So outcomes is what's the project or the investment going to give us? And the benefits is what's from an outside perspective, what do they actually tangibly see? They are two different things. And then what resourcing do we need? Some information, a summary about the stakeholder engagement undertaken, and then we start to get the expenditure summary. So how much money do we need, do we think, if we were to solve this problem? And really appreciate at this point, sometimes we will have no view whatsoever of what the solution is at this, and nor do we want you to. However, in some cases, particularly the asset space, we have a fair idea of what it might be. So we build on this estimate and we revise it every step. So this is also just the life of project cost. So it's what is the value we need to build it up front, and then when we get to the next phase, we do operating and maintenance costs to give us that whole of life cost. So I'm also starting to fill out what some of those funding outcomes are, and this helps us identify projects easier, or if we, when we have funding come up by the state and the feds. So then you go into the endorsement. So you do your problem case, your business case with your problem statement. We're doing the gate one checklist and we have a decision by the sponsor, so we move on to the business case. So in here, we again update the engagement plan, stakeholder, we complete the full business case. So this is where we're getting our first, I guess, full draft of the business case. Again, same thing goes to IIC if they're required, and there's a gate 2 checklist, and then it goes to the sponsor, so same sort of steps. So then, and I'll just quickly jump out and show you the business case. I won't go into as much detail because we're going to run out of time, but these examples are all on the connected page already. So again, we're just building on the same information. Everything's the same here. We have the opportunity to update if we've got more information. So in the risk and rating information, we're looking at, in the previous problem statement, we rated the risk of not doing or not solving the problem. Now we're getting into, okay, now that we know the preferred option, because we've done all the work down below, what's the residual risk if we actually go ahead and do the preferred option? So for the water, for this water reservoir, the risk of not doing the project is we run out of water to homes, we can't supply water, and then we end up running out of storage capacity. So there's a high risk in that. In terms of residual risk, if we implement the solution and the preferred solution at the end of this is a reservoir, then it all drops down to pretty low because we're able to take the reservoir offline and we're supplying that capacity. So then with just a bit of description around that. Thing I just wanted to show you, a lot of this, for those that are familiar with the old IPP bid document, this is built off of that. So it's not, there are a few extra fields, but it all is fairly same in terms of what we're asking you for. We do ask you to look at the options, and I haven't quite finished filling this out, apologies. So really we're asking what are all the possible options, and for this problem we had do nothing, additional storage at the existing site, we had additional storage at a new site which is the same level, we had install a VSD pump, We had install a pump at Silverdale Reservoir, not Mount Elizabeth. Then we had build new pipelines, we had a new connection from a different zone in Gladstone, we had build a treatment plant. So I guess what I'm trying to show is that the options, you need to look really broad of how you're going to solve it. And then there could be a non-asset solution, so do a water-wise education to get everyone to reduce how much water they're using, and so that and obviously that solution would only solve our storage problem, wouldn't actually solve the resilience problem. So then you get a recommended option, a scope of work, a very brief scope of work, but very important, of what's in and out. Remembering that this business case then gets handed over to the design team and the project manager then to start to actually do this. And then a number of other options, number of other information throughout there, and we bring in our whole of life cost. So I won't dwell on that too much more. You can go into there, but I guess the important thing is that we're building on that information and we're getting that next level and we're actually getting that understanding what it is we're going to do. So a business case, the Gate 2 checklist, and we have a decision by the sponsor. Okay, our select phase. So we've now got a decision, so our business case is approved. We know we have our recommended option. We're now starting into that concept development. We hand over from a proponent to a project manager. They also get the stakeholder engagement plan and update it. This is when the PMF commences, including those project change requests, which are integral to updating the business case if we need to. That is our mechanism. So we're getting away from where we just used to willy-nilly update it for whatever reason. The only way you can update the business case, where it's been fully completed, is to do a project change request. The project manager will obviously work with the design lead or other teams that's needed on that concept development, and may also be working, obviously under the PMF there's roles of design lead, construction lead and procurement lead, so those roles come in here. Now there's a gate checklist, and this is different to the previous gate checklist. We have part A and part B. Part A, the project manager is filling out, and there's a series of questions to make sure they've actually fulfilled their requirements under the project management framework, which is also then handy for when the sponsor gets it to see that that's all been done. And so the sponsor then is filling out the questions around the prudency and of do we actually continue with this investment, and makes the gate decision. So this, and I don't expect you to read this is just an image of the project management framework, the capital project management framework process chart. And the key message around here is that they align, and they align seamlessly. So when we get to the select phase, this is where you start. The project manager is doing a project management plan. You've got your technical people, like your design leads, doing your design and working, reporting back up to that PM. In this phase, we're looking at what is the possible delivery approach we're going to take, because you need to make decisions in here. Is it going to be a design then construct, or a D&C type project? So, and there's a number of different outputs in this phase from a project management framework. So as we said, in here, if we find through concept development that we actually need to change the business case, is that project change request that we need the PM would fill out, obviously with the stakeholders and with the design lead or whoever's relevant, and then would escalate that up to the sponsor for a change. So by the time we get to gate 3, at the end of this phase, that business case has been updated with all the relevant information before a decision then gets made. So there is a checklist, and as I said, it's just, and again, I don't expect you to read it, it's just part A and part B. So it's just, all it looks like is a series of questions to make sure that we've got consistency in our projects. And not all questions are going to be relevant for everything, but they're just simple things like, you know, has the business case been updated? Do we have design reports, and do we have a PMP? So just getting some consistency in those deliverables across all of our investments. And then section B is for the project sponsor. Okay, so with our water reservoir example, so we've done our project change request through the phase. The project manager does part A of Gate 3 checklist, and then the sponsor does part B, and we make a decision. So again, 4 decisions can be made. It's probably good to point out that at Gate 3, this might actually be the final investment decision. If we decided we're going to do a D&C for this reservoir, this will be the final investment decision where I, as a sponsor, would escalate up to Mark Francis for the decision. So in this example, we've just assumed that we're not doing a D&C. So Gate 4, now I am conscious I'm talking a lot, and apologies if everyone's falling asleep.
So can I just ask you a question?
Yes, you can, absolutely, break it up.
In the Gate 3, example, we decided we can't do the design in-house, we're going on procurement for design services.
Yep.
Tenders come in and we've got the alternative designs.
Yep.
How are they being dealt with in this process? Because obviously you'll have your normal procurement process running, and then you've identified potential alternative designs which you think might be more suitable, and then you probably need to go back and do a change request.
Absolutely. So it would represent a change in the scope, potentially, depending on what the alternatives that they come back to. And so I would typically say it's going to be a change in scope, which then triggers a project change request for the sponsor to sign off on that scope. But I guess what I add on top of that, before you sort of go, well, that's a lot of paperwork and red tape.
Yeah, I'm just seeing this incoming book. It really comes back down to that alternative approach they want to take, does it really change the essence of the project, or is it just a different methodology that we didn't really have? And if it's just methodology and the outcomes and the objectives of the project stay the same, then you can make that decision yourselves. It's only when it starts to impact those objectives and outcomes of the actual project or the actual business case that you need that change request, if that makes sense. Yep.
So,
an example of that would be, instead of replacing the bridge, you build a road around it. That's a change in the project itself. You're no longer building a bridge, you're putting access road around the bridge.
Which I would say is, I guess you've got a scope change.
Yep.
And in which case probably would be worthwhile to revisit the business case to make sure.
So it goes back to the front.
No, it doesn't go back to the front. You do your change request and you assess that change against the business case. So what we're looking to see as a sponsor is that we're not changing an investment, a scope of investment that then makes it unviable. So that might be well and good they say that, but it costs an extra $1 million, which then means it's not viable to continue, or maybe that's not a viable solution. Or it's cheaper up front, but it's now going to cost us extra to operate and maintain, so it's not the best solution. So what we're trying to trigger is to make sure that every change we do, the big stuff, I'm not talking the nitty-gritty stuff, the big stuff, that the investment is still valid.
if that makes sense. And it'll be a work in progress to find that balance too, between what has to escalate up and what has an impact and what doesn't. So yeah, we'll have to work with that one, but that's the intent behind it.
So any changes will be within the scope.
Pardon?
Every changes or alternatives will be within the scope.
So you may have alternatives that come back from contractors that are outside of the scope, which is perfectly fine, that's innovation. However, what I'm saying is we need to make sure that we're not accepting a solution or an alternative that then means when you check the business case and that option, it doesn't make it unviable because it's way more expensive to operate or whatever it might be.
Or the capital is sky.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, it might cost us an extra $10 million to build this thing. But yeah, compared to the two we initially. So
Basically, could you consider that as scope creep?
correct. That's what we're trying to stop.
Stop. Because we had a similar case now recently where it's nice to have, but it's not really growing.
Yeah. And that's the fundamental reason of saying that this project change request is the only way that you can then change that business case, because the business case is what sets up your high level scope and objectives of this investment. Okay, so we've got our Gate 3 approval. We're moving on to our detail execution planning and detailed design or detailed development. Sometimes it might not have a design in it. Some of our renewal stuff doesn't, and it's a bit different, but it still needs that detailed execution planning. So again, very similar to the previous one, we're updating the stakeholder engagement plan and engaging with those people. We're continuing the PMF, including change requests, the maintenance management framework doesn't start here, forget that bit, we're only up to 5. And we work, and the project manager's working with the design lead. They're also probably working with the construction lead and the procurement lead in various ways, preparing for this in the execution planning phase. So again, the next bit's the same. We complete Gate 4 checklist, Part A, and then goes to the sponsor. If it's final investment decision, it goes to the GM. And then they do Part B and make a decision. So under the project management framework, and I don't know if I explained this properly, but IDF is the governance that sit across all our investments. The project management framework is just the detail underneath of how we do this execution or this, the managing of the actual work. So again, it aligns, we're typically doing that detailed engineering in here. So when we head into define, as we go into Gate 3, we've now got our selected optimal solution. So we know what we're really going to build. In the select phase, there may still be optioneering happening, but it's more your engineering stuff. So for our reservoir, it's things like, what material are we building this reservoir out of? What's the site layout going to be? We've got options for all of that. However, we know we're going to build a reservoir on this site in select. When we get to define, all that detail is started to be really locked down, and we're not really doing as much of that optioneering. So then there's a series of things that's happening in the different business units being sat, and then also leading into the works planning and scheduling area with the project managers. And then potentially we're bringing in also the operation, in that operation space, our actual delivery managers, so like water program delivery and park and waste and roads delivery. And they really are stakeholders. We presented this before, and Brodie's been my wingman on this and can't be with us today. So the resources to support the execution phase are identified in here. So that's that detailed execution planning and presented to Gate 4. So the sponsor has that view to make sure that we really are ready to execute this project. So is everything in place to execute? So Gate 4 checklist, again, a series, Part A and Part B, a series of questions just to make sure. So I suggest go and read, have a look at these if you're interested, they're all connected. So we've developed our detailed plans, both technical and our project management. We've done all our project change requests through the phase, and we're up to our final investment decision. We have our Gate 4 checklist, and the decision for this reservoir would be made by the GM because I was the sponsor on it, so I'm the level 3. So it would be escalated to Mark Francis in this particular example we've been using.
Sorry.
No, you're right.
How does this thing actually flow through to your budget and council approval at some stage?
Yep, so it all flows. If I can hold that question, I've got a few more slides and I'll show you how that all fits in.
Okay.
Yeah, seamlessly, Darryl, seamlessly it flows.
Okay. Now, you're in a final decision and you're going to start executing, so there must be funding somewhere along there.
Correct, yes. Yes. So behind every phase and gate, and I haven't showed it in here, but it's all in the connected, there's a detailed process of the steps for each phase and gate and how that works. The very first decision point or question in those processes for every single one is, do you have budget? And I'll talk further about the fact that investment decisions through this gate is very different to budget decisions, and we're now separating the two. They can happen in either order, but you need both to proceed. And we're streamlining some of that, particularly with the capital portfolio and how we're going to manage these. So we're now into building it. In execute, so we update in the project manager, does the engagement plan, continues the PMF, we commence the maintenance management framework, and that's all about preparing, so we know we're going to get at the end of this, at Gate 5, we're going to have an operating asset, so how are we operating and maintaining it? Do we have spare parts? Are we ready? Are we ready to actually bring this asset online? The PM's working with the design lead, construction lead and procurement lead to do all the activities in the phase that needs to happen. And once we get to the end, we go, yep, we've done all of that. We're completing Gate 5 checklist Part A, then goes to the sponsor to complete Part B and makes a decision. Really key, from this point on, the decisions are now either one or two things, not the four. So it's either, yes, you've done everything, proceed, or I need more information. We've already built the thing, we've spent money, we can't say stop now.
But I guess there should be operations lead there as well, or works with design lead, construction lead, procurement lead, but ops need to.
You need the operational plan or something.
At the moment,
how it can be operated, how it must be operated.
Yeah.
Just that, yeah.
So I consider them as a stakeholder.
Okay.
So, and I didn't say this, and I've said it in every other one, is that your stakeholder engagement plan will have at least one stakeholder on it. I can guarantee you, and that's the person or the team that's taking is your service provider. So who's actually going to operate this thing? So you could have them as an operations lead, whatever you want to put them as, but yeah, they're captured as either a stakeholder under here. So again, the project management framework aligns to this execute phase, and we're executing and monitoring and controlling under the PMF. This is typically when the project is in construction. Yes, we got the project management plan has been finalised and endorsed by the sponsor and is monitored and maintained throughout the phase by the PM. The project manager can liaise with the asset governance team to create the proposed assets in the asset register and provide all those asset IDs to start preparing those operating and maintenance plans. So both aspects. So the outputs of this phase, when presented to the project sponsor, is all about did we deliver and are we ready to operate. So this is a really, and Brady talked about it, so I'm not out of line here, talked about it, this is a huge area of improvement where we're trying to bring these activities forward. So we're not handing over assets to be operated without all this information of how you actually do it. So
and that includes training.
Correct, the whole lot. So we're learning a lot of lessons from some of our recent projects, and most of us are probably aware of biosolids is probably a really classic example that we probably didn't nail that well. But there's lots of others in that realm, so it's about learning from them and hence the concerted effort of bringing that forward and making sure we do that properly. So again, there's a Gate 5 checklist and a whole bunch of questions for project manager and then sponsor. And really they're all about, as we get more mature in this process, I imagine these questions will die down and we won't have to have as many, but it's just more triggering us because we're all going to be somewhat new at it. So again, project change requests throughout the phase, Gate 5 checklist, and then a decision by the sponsor. And then we close it. So this is the last phase, sorry, not the last phase. It's leading into the last gate, I should say. So engages with stakeholders, continues the PMF and MMF, continues work with those key leads and completes Gate 6 checklist. So it's all about I call it finalising the paperwork and doing your benefits realisations, lessons learned, and understanding, we know we delivered and we're operating, that's cool, we did that at Gate 5, but did we deliver as planned? So let's reflect back to the business case. So this is where the IOC gets involved if required. They'll fill out Part B and make a recommendation and the sponsor makes the final decision. So again, it's either I need more information or approved. If they approve, this is project closed. So we completed off in the IDP system, we're done. And I'll talk about we do have one last phase, which is operate and maintain, which is BAU, and I'll talk about it in a second. So the closure phase or the closed phase of IDF aligns with the PMF, and it's really talking about all those processes around finance and asset governance. So capitalisation comes into this. We're making sure we've recorded everything in the asset register. So obviously we had an ID before, but making sure all the information is there. Lessons learned, benefits realisation, and what we're talking there is those initial benefits. Did we get those initial ones? And have we completed as planned is the question. So that's the checklist, and we're really doing that project change request again, same thing, Gate 6, checklist, decision by the sponsor. And then we go into that business as usual. I've got one more slide and I'm going to break and let everyone stand up and wake up and have a quick break and then we'll jump back in. So operate and maintain, this is the last phase and it does exist in the IDF because it is really important. It's that business as usual, so the asset owner, asset manager and service provider undertaking their roles as relevant under our operating model here at Council. It come up quite often in the consultation around this defects liability period so if applicable, not all capital. So where we landed was we had a yo-yo of whether gate 6 should be before or after that period. Where we've landed is gate 6 is before, and so that defects liability period is still going to be monitored by the project manager or contract owner, but we don't need it to run out to close the project. And in reality, we don't wait for it normally. That's not practice. So just being really clear that we've got systems and processes in the contracting space to allow us to monitor that and call that in. And I know there's work all the time on making sure we're doing that in a timely way, and that the operations teams are supported, I guess, if they do have a defect, escalating it back up through to that project manager, contract owner. So yeah, probably a key thing was certainly a lot of debate had over that bit. Okay, I'm going to stop. Let's take, what's the time now? Let's take 10 minutes. So if we can come back at 1:35, and we'll have a toilet break, drink break, and come back in and shake out our legs. But before we break, was there just any questions on any of that? I appreciate there's a lot of talking by me and a lot of information.
Just a question on just for clarification again, at which stage in this process are we giving consideration to maintenance or operational resources after the delivery of the project? Say, for example, we're doing a new sewage plant. We are going to need additional operators and vehicles and blah, blah. So when does that happen?
Yeah, so the first point you consider it is right back in the assess phase as part of your business case. So part of the business case, when you're looking at all your options, you're having to consider, well, what's my upfront capital cost, so the life of project cost, but then what is also my operating and maintenance cost, and we unpack that a bit. Well, what are the requirements? Do I need, is that an extra person? Is that a, what is that we need, and what does that look like? Because that should be part of choosing which option you proceed with as well. So right from that stage, that's the first point. And then as you go along in, I guess, getting your estimates more accurate, you're considering that. Then when you get to the execute phase and you enter the maintenance management framework, that's when you're really looking at detail. How are we actually maintaining and operating? And if it was decided you're getting a new operator on board, well, that happens in the execute phase. You recruit from them, so they're ready to operate when that asset goes live. We're not getting that person.
No, what you want to plan for in
Correct.
At that stage, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, righto. No questions online. I've got no hands up. I hope you're all still there. I can't see you. Righto, all good. Let's break. 1:35. We'll kick back off. I'm just going to mute in this room. That's why you won't hear us. Okay, have we got everyone back online, or have I lost you all? Give me an extra 4 minutes.
Exist.
Which we did take up 4 minutes answering the questions, so you're probably rightly so. Okay. Excellent, excellent. Let's kick back into this. The next lot, and I do appreciate that there is a fair bit more information to come, and we are about halfway. The rest of the information is more, I guess, details around the support stuff to all this, and the different, I guess, culture and behaviour changes we're driving through this as well. So let's jump into it. So one of the really, and this is I guess, when we looked at the problems we were trying to solve by introducing IDF, one of the problems was around how the current bid documents that we use has a lot of rich data in it, but we can't actually pull it out unless you're just looking on an individual basis, because you've actually got to go into IPP and download the Excel file. So I'll talk about the mechanics of the gate, but that is a problem we're trying to solve, and we're not going to solve it 1st of July, but we are going to solve it in the second, sort of by late August, so a couple of months later. So we've got a 2-step rollout happening, I guess, in terms of the mechanics of these gates. So from 1st of July, what you're to expect is that these forms, so when the investment opportunity brief and business case, and those checklists that we talked about are going to be paper-based. So we're still going to have to fill out that Word document, and we're still going to have to get signatures on those documents. And then it's going to be a manual update of IPP, and that'll happen and be facilitated by the asset governance team. And we're working out through those details now to make sure you've got a really clear procedure of where do I save this document, how do I get my approvals, what happens next. So very similar, I guess, to what we've had in the past with the IPP bid documents. The IOC meetings and agenda will be facilitated by the governance team. So Brooke Saunders is leading that team, and they're the owner. They will be the owner of IDF, and I'm passing, I guess, when I go on leave end of next week, I'm passing the reins over to Brooke to take IDF into that implementation. So I guess the first step change, I think, is a huge win for this, is that in IPP itself, so in Tech 1, we're adding a whole bunch of fields. So that whole business case will exist as fields in IPP. So we can run any sort of report out of that and pull out all the bits of information from the business case. So that's a big change from where we were, because currently IPP just has a select few fields, not all of them. So whilst it's still going to be manual update and resource intensive and double handling a little bit, at least we're getting the data in the right place as our source of truth. So tip, step change, progress over perfection. So then we've got a Tech 1 consultant on board at the moment, and we had scoping sessions with him last week about these changes that we're then going to make. And so what that key change is then is we're moving from paper-based to direct entry into IPP. So from sort of that late August, early September, instead of filling out your paper-based form, you're going to actually fill out it direct. So you're going to fill in the fields direct into IPP. Then you'll have to select to get your approval, and that will then trigger notifications to certain, your sponsor to then go into IPP and approve. So that's what we're building at the moment. It's not automated. I got shot down for saying it was automated. I felt like it was much more automated than what we currently got. So it's kind of, we're working with the software that we've got and making the best of the situation we've got. So progress over perfection. So all gate approvals will be via Tech 1 workflows with checklists. Those checklists will be built into them as such. So they will be direct entry as well. There will be still a manual update of IPP required by the asset governance team when we have change requests. Sorry, I've just got a question. Hang on, I'm just looking on my phone because I can't actually see it on my computer.
This may be a silly question, but is IPP for capital projects only, or?
Not a silly question. It's a good question. Yeah, it's a good question. So capital projects only to start with. I've been working with Sarah Hunter over the last couple of weeks, and we know that IPP can work for operational stuff. We just haven't pulled that trigger to say operational has to go in there. So at the moment it'll be just capital, but most likely the tool we're going to use for operational is IPP as well.
And if I might make a remark there, which makes sense because you're still changing out assets in your operations, and that doesn't really flow back to us in many instances. Or, you know, those decisions.
Yeah. And there's other types of operational investment not associated to assets. So they're things like where we do a business improvement or our operational plan items. So we've got 14 items that got adopted today in our budget and operational plan. So those 14 they're considering as being the trial run of op plan items to push them through IPP and capture them in there. They're not sure of that, but you know, they're the types of things they're thinking of in that operational plan space. But no decisions are being made on what's going to happen. So yeah, good question. Yeah, operational's just not about assets, exactly. So we've got, you know, our transformation program, our op plan items, we've got business improvement stuff, so process stuff that happens, and then we've got continual business improvement that happens. They're all examples, I guess, of operational investments. Okay, so the IOC meetings and agenda will still be facilitated by the governance team, and we're working through what that looks like and how that happens and whether that can be built into those notifications from workflows or not. So yeah, so mechanics of the gate, and it's changing. It's a two-step process. So yeah, we'll get there. So document locations, all the gate checklist templates, and also those investment brief and business case are all on Connected. They are just, so all the templates we talk about today are saved in ECM and there's links to them on Connected. So if we make a change to the template, then it happens in ECM and it just pushes out to that link. The project management plans, sub-plans and closeout reports that are under that capital project management framework are the same thing. They're all saved in ECM and they're just linked out to Connected. So Connected, we really are building as your place to go to. So just out of curiosity, this is just an example of a significant investment. So it's the Boyne-Tanham Aquatic Recreation Centre. And I just wanted to give a different perspective of the different categories and how they go through and some different variations or situations that may come up. So with this one, this is a real life one and we're currently sitting in doing some concept design at the moment, or we're pretty much at the end of that phase almost. So this opportunity came up by council, and whilst they didn't do an investment opportunity brief, they under this process they will have to, and it was a resolution from the floor at council, a motion from the floor, and so effectively they decided that gate zero. They said, yep, good idea, proceed and come back to us when you've got a business case. So as officers, Carly Quinn, the GM of S&T, is the sponsor on this one, and Ericsson was, I guess, the person preceding this. We then went off and did the problem statement and business case, and we did get external assistance to help us. We got a consultant to help. I guess what I should say, we did that problem opportunity statement first up, and we went to the community and asked them what they thought as well. Gate 1 decision, if IDF is in play, we would have had an IOC review and the decision by the sponsor to progress then to finish the business case. This here, because council in their resolution just said bring the business case back to me, that's why gate 1 is just the sponsor deciding that, not council. They did the business case and they went back to council with that business case. And then they said, yep, proceed, come back to us with concept design. So we've now gone for concept design. We'll then have to go back to them for gate 3 resolution. So see how we're only going back to them if council actually resolves that we have to. Otherwise, it's the sponsor that will decide. And then I've just assumed that it does progress and this is how it might play out. In this example, there is conversation around it would be delivered as a D&C type project. So your final investment decision, potentially you could say maybe back at gate 3, or you might build into your contract, even though it's D&C, that we have an ability to pull the contract at gate 4 after that detailed design's done. So, and then it progresses through like the water reservoir. So I'll skip over this one. So this is an example of a standard investment, and I guess the key thing is not only a lot of the text disappeared, but it disappeared because we've got less rigour around this standard project. We don't need the rigour like we do a new pool. So this is a timber bridge replacement. This is Gorge Road, so we're executing that one at the moment. If we were to run through this process, we'd have an investment opportunity brief that it's a renewal, so it'd probably be done at a Niels' team in performance and monitoring. And then line manager decision, gate 1's not required, but you're still going to do the phase work. So you're still going to understand your problem, do your business case, and then the sponsor's the decision maker all the way through. And this is an example, we did this bridge as a D&C. So urgent, the only difference with urgent, I guess, is we're doing this front phase and gate in parallel as we start the select phase, and we don't need gate 1 and 2 decision, but we're still going to do the phase work. So we still need to understand what our problem is with this land slip or whatever it might be, or the AO1 sewage rising main is this example where we've got the main currently sitting on the abutment of the bridge. We're still going to work out, you know, what is the problem, what's causing it, what are all our options to solve it, and then we get a concept of that selected option. And then we proceed on. Okay, so capital change requests. So this is around project change control. Under the maximising capital work delivery, so the transformation program this year, there was 5 projects, the IDF was one, the PNF or project management was another, program of work, or what we now call capital portfolio, and then maintenance management, as well as contract management. So they are the 5 projects. We're going to cover off training today on the first 3, and so this change control was one of the key deliverables of reviewing how we do project change control, because it was a little bit loose, and really tying it back into the IDF is what we've now done, as you've seen, as we've talked about it. So what is project change control? They're processes used to manage any change requests that impact the baseline of your project. And there's typically going to be 5 steps that occur. So you've got to propose the change, you've got to look at the impact of that change, make a decision, make the change, and then so making the change includes any of your contractual issues you might have or change variations, and then you're going to close it out. So there is and again, I'm not expecting you to read those words. This is the process map that we've developed using our process improvement team or business improvement team. And it really is split into those key steps. So this first part of the process map is proposing the change. We then, which could come from anyone, it's the requester. Typically it's going to come from the sponsor or the project manager, but we have got examples where it's come from elsewhere. The impact summary, so what does this change mean for the project? We then make the decision, which goes to the sponsor. And then we make the change, so that then pushes out
these little symbols here are actually showing where we're pushing out to other processes, like we might have to update the capital portfolio, we might have to update or make a contract variation. So we've got other processes in the business that then pushes to and then comes back into this process. And this last one is about updating the IPP. So if we look at this, we have to first propose the change. And Brady used the example when we've been talking about this of the Gundoon Street footpath project, where the requester wasn't the PM or the sponsor. It actually comes from our rates officer who said, hey, we've got water meter pit lids in this footpath and they're really heavy to lift for our readers. So as part of the project, can we actually change them out? So that is an example, I guess, it come through. And there's obviously a scope change with that as well as associated cost because we weren't intending to replace them. And so that was assessed and they ended up approving that. So we did that change. So this is the actual form. This section A is to be completed by the requester. So it might, filling this in may not necessarily be that rates officer. It might be the project manager, but they're using the information from that rates officer in that example to fill this in. So just some basic detail of what it is.
So the rates officer actually reads the meter?
The rates team are the ones that are accountable for getting the meter reads done. Yeah, so they have the information. They obviously get the reports back from the meter readers saying it's heavy or whatever the issue is. It's obviously a potential safety issue.
Yep.
So once we've completed it, every project change request goes into a register, and this is a register per project to keep a track of what are all the changes so that we make sure that you know, you can easily assess that budget impact and all those other aspects. We're also looking at currently of do we need to actually record some minimum information from this project change request in the IPP to give visibility? So potentially we're going to have a small table that has some of these columns in the IPP as well. So when asset governance updates the IPP after an approved change request, they're also updating that table. So we've got visibility in one central place. And if you want more detail, then you go into you can delve into this register. So that's what we're kind of thinking of at the moment. But that'd be the project manager looking after that register in that example. So the next bit is impact. So we're now moving on to section B, and this is the meaty bit of it. So what is this change and what impact does it have on the project? So we're identifying how the change impacts on the baseline parameters. So I couldn't think of all these before when you're asking me questions, but their objectives, their scope, deliverables, budget, schedule milestones and quality. So the form is set up and over onto the right hand side is the start of this section B. And it's all about understanding which of those elements is changing. It could be multiple. So the form obviously asks you what's the triggers, what's the project status, you know, what's the health of it like now, to then be able to, I guess, look at this second page or second bit is around, well, let's detail out in those key areas, what is the change we're actually wanting to make.
If you go, sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're right.
If you go back to the previous year, I haven't seen time. It's
schedule.
It's
Schedule milestones is time.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're right. Everyone calls it different too.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So absolutely time is one. Time sometimes can have an impact on, I guess, validity of a
project. It's more time has an impact on resourcing, and then more that capital portfolio management of, if we have a slippage, then what does that mean? Do we then overlay projects at the back end that we don't have resources to manage them properly? But some of them we might be time critical. So we have one at the moment, which is our communications upgrade in SCADA, which we have a very clear 30th of June deadline because they're taking away our current 900 meg system. So it has a very clear drop dead date, which if you then have a change to the schedule that wants to push it out, then we've got an issue. We can't.
Correct.
We've got to look at mitigation to get that back online. Okay, so not only is the PM going to look at these impacts on all those different aspects, they're also looking at, well, if it's not approved, this request, then what's the impact then? Because that can have a reverse impact. And what's the benefits? We're also asking the PMs to provide a recommendation to the sponsor. So they are obviously one of the people that are closest to this project, and they would be filling this out in consultation with, design leads or whoever's relevant. But it's a recommendation of which way should we approve it, should we not? I've seen them come through to me and it's not approved. Don't approve it. And that, particularly like that rates officer one, like they may say, great idea, but we for whatever reason, it's not good for the business to do this. So, and also just showing what consultation has happened. And as a minimum, from my perspective, as someone who's a sponsor often, is that if this form comes through to me and it's an engineering change and I can't see that the engineering team, so engineering asset solutions, so the design lead, they haven't been involved, and I send it back and say, no, go talk to them before you come to me. So the next is making the decision, and that is the project sponsor. And obviously we can have approved, partially approved, conditionally approved, changes not approved, or a revised change request required, so pretty standard. And then you notify the outcome, and then asset governance part of the process is we then update the business case. So this idea that we're continually updating the business case, as opposed to what we're currently in is that we get to budget time, we go, we've got to update business cases, quick, everyone drop what you're doing and do big documents. So last bit is make the change, and really that's just about, we've got elements of, there might be a contract variation that has to happen. If it's a schedule, we might have to update the capital portfolio, and then at the end we update IPP to reflect and capture all that. So again, the document location, the change request template is part of the capital project management framework. And it can be accessed on, it's safe and ECM accessed on Connected, as well as the project change log is the same place. If issues arise in the use of these documents, we have our business champions in the project management framework working group. So that's an established group where they're working through any issues that come up with this stuff. Or if you just need a hand, you're not sure how to fill it out or whatever, just ask.
Do we know who the roles are in the PMF working group yet?
I don't believe so, unless an email's come out in the last day. I don't think that's been announced, but that'll be up on the community page. So when Brodie spoke about this Thursday last week, he said he was just finalising and will release an email letting everyone know who they are.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so that then I guess flows into, we keep talking about this thing called capital portfolio. This is not a new thing. We've had this for the last 12 months or so. Works planning and scheduling, so particularly Danessa is the document controller, I guess, of this, and it is locked down, but it is viewable for everyone. You just can't edit it. So what it is, it's an Excel spreadsheet. It's that 3-year view that we talked about, and we're currently building that to get any projects that start, at least from that select phase, so concept will be in here, and our capital will be in here. We're just kind of building on that, getting that years 2 and 3 in there at the moment. So adding in 21, 22 projects and then building on after that. So it's as simple as an Excel spreadsheet, but it's tracking, I guess, in more detail what's happening with these projects, and we're aligning this to understand the phases it's at as well, not only from an IDF perspective, but the phases in terms of, well, are we in procurement or are we actually executing? So it goes down to a more granular level, and it helps us to do resource planning as well.
Can I just add, the capital portfolio doesn't show paused projects, so that's captured in your IPP. These are live, active projects that we're currently working on.
So it contains project attributes identified during the Tiger Team workshops, and most of which have been populated. It's a rolling 3-year program and includes project reporting and health metrics. So it is used as that master file to then do the capital reporting as well up to execs. So it's meant to be the single source of truth. It gives us visibility, governance, transparency, and creates effectiveness across the business. And it also is what informs the capital budget. So when you had the question before, Daryl, about budget, the intent and what we're moving to is that we will, as business as usual, we're updating the IPP with project change, so they're up to date. We're updating capital portfolio at the same time. So when we come to build a budget, we just have to take a snapshot of what's been forecasted, and that's our budget. Simple, done, easy. So the capital portfolio absolutely is giving us our budget. So trying to make that simpler. So,
sorry, I'm just trying to picture it. So we've gone through the IDF, and now we've identified a project somewhere along the line through that process, and we need to get it in the budget. To do that, we need to get it into the capital portfolio.
Correct.
First, and then.
Correct.
So what stage does it go in here?
Yep, up the gate to approval.
Okay.
Yep, so in the process, there's a check. So up the gate to approval, which is your business case approved, it then enters capital portfolio if the next phase is due to start in the next 3 years. If it doesn't, it'll go into the outer year, and there's a process we're developing of every year we bring year 4 into year 3, if that makes sense, to pick it up. Yeah, so we end up with that one, it's rolling. Yeah, so that's kind of the trigger and the flow, which is a bit of a change to how we currently do it, but a tidier change and an improvement. So the works planning and scheduling team are the ones that look after this capital portfolio. And I guess the key positions, we've got the manager in there as well as the team leader of project delivery, the works program reporting officer and works scheduler are the key people. We do have a capital portfolio working group, so and they are there to effectively manage that capital portfolio and decisions around it. So if we've got to push and pull projects forward and back, or we need budget reallocated, because there's been changes. So they are the ones that won't decide if it should be allocated, it's how can we make that happen. So The project sponsor through change requests, particularly budget decisions, will approve whether we need to do this change and therefore need the extra $1 million, say, and then it'll come to the capital portfolio to go, okay, we know we've got a bottom line of our total portfolio, how do we move this around to make this happen? And I'll talk a little bit more about that and give you some examples. The working group is made up of 5 people, so manager of works planning and scheduling, manager of asset governance, so Tanya, manager of contracts and procurement, Christy, systems modelling and metric specialist, so Sarah Skinner, and strategic grant specialist, Rowena. And that works planning and scheduling manager is our new Brian. Okay, so there is a process map that covers all of this, and the key elements, I guess, is that change could happen from a number of different places and need to update the portfolio, and it basically goes into the funnel. It gets assessed by so Danessa and Rachel, the schedulers, to work out how we do that. They effectively then give a recommendation through the portfolio working group, and a decision gets made, update capital portfolio, and we move on. So yeah, there's a lot of touch points, I guess, at the start and end of this process, but it is hopefully, when we put it into practice, going to make the pain points around hitting budget much simpler and easier, because we now have a defined process for it. We're currently documenting a business manual for the capital portfolio. So we'll have that to help guide those business rules around it.
Do you want to just, sorry, so Lisa, do you want to just go back and just touch on a key change to our previous budget process? Is that the capital portfolio working group assess if the change to the portfolio is going to impact the bottom line of that endorsed budget, and it's going to look like we're going to have to increase the overall endorsed budget, then the working group will send a recommendation over to the systems modelling and metrics team, and they will then follow their due process to get that budget approved or reapproved.
Yeah, yep. And that'll make it, that's a lot of words, but that'll make it, I've got a few examples of what those different situations are when we need to go down that track. Yeah. Right. Maintenance management framework. This is a diagram that represents it, and obviously it's a framework that has lots more underneath it, similar to the IDF. Again, not expecting you to read that. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here because we're doing a lot of work at the moment in Niels's project around fleshing this out more, but what I really wanted to show is that all these things, while it might seem like there's lots of frameworks and lots of stuff happening, we've made a really conscious effort to align them all. So in terms of, I just overlaid the IDF phases at the top here, and these green ones are the MMF phases or bits of work. So the program and plan of the MMF lines up to the execute. So while we're building our assets, we're making sure that we're programming and planning that maintenance and operation. Then we're obviously doing the maintenance and operation because the asset comes live at gate 5. And then we go into the operate and maintain, which is our business as usual. And then in the maintenance management framework, we have this close and improve. So it's just about reviewing those programs often and then feeding back into the start and changes. So obviously the maintenance management framework deals with existing assets, and where we've got an asset that comes online, it might actually just slot into an existing program, or it might be a whole new set itself. So I guess it's really important that we ensure we're ready to operate and maintain before going live, so at gate 5, and I put a lot of emphasis on that because there's a lot of pain points we heard around that. All stakeholders have the required information, and the asset manager and service provider are ready. So, okay, so cost estimates. This is another area around a change in language. I guess it's not new by any means. It's just getting some consistency in how we use this language in this business. So you'll see in the corporate standard, and even today we've been talking about that we have a life of project cost. So it's kind of your upfront cost. We then have your operate and maintain cost. And when you add those two things together, you get the whole of life cost. So being very, very conscious that right from that assess phase in that business case, we want to consider whole of life cost to work out that validity. So just some little tips. So the cost estimate is expected to mature through all phases, and we're given some guidance in the IDF matrix around what we expect it to be, and that kind of helps with setting contingencies. And we have made tools available to help us estimate those operating and maintenance costs where we don't have the information available already. So obviously as we start capturing those costs, we can then be using them for these projects, but where we don't have them, we've got a tool that kind of use industry costs. Stakeholder engagement, the plan is mandatory from identify phase, and I'll run you through an example for that reservoir projects, but that's what it looks like down the bottom. And really what we're doing is we're trying to understand the influence of the stakeholder versus their interest. And that basically puts them in one of 4 places and helps us understand how much contact we need to have them and what type of engagement. Some of them might just need general information. So they won't have an influence or an interest, but they really need to be informed of what's going on. Again, I can guarantee you that there is at least one stakeholder on every single asset project, and that's the team that's going to take it over at the end, which is typically those water, parks, road, waste program delivery teams. Okay, so just as an example, it's not complicated, this template at all, and it has 2 parts to it. One is identifying the stakeholder. So I'm using that water reservoir at Calliope as an example. So who are the stakeholders? I've just said it's the service provider, which will be Clint as the manager of water program delivery. What is his needs or expectations? So at the end of the day, he just needs a fit for purpose asset that makes sure that we can supply water. So he has a responsibility under the Act to supply water at certain levels, at certain quality, and he needs to make sure that we've got assets that supply that. So he's a high level influence and interest, so we're going to manage closely, so he needs to be actively involved. Then we look at, well, how will we engage? And a hot tip is that if you want to know how they want to be engaged with, go and ask them. So in this example, I rang Clint. Hey Clint, how do you want to be involved in this project? We're at this phase and this might change. So at the front end, you might say, I want to be involved in the problem, but then not until we come to the design. So just ask them. So he said include in stakeholder workshops. So what else must we do? We must make sure we send those invites. The asset planning engineer is responsible for that because we're still doing the business case. And we're going to start that from the identified phase. So again, every phase that might change and you've got to update it. Okay, so risks and records. All risks are to be recorded in Beacon. They've rolled out Beacon now as our system. We're expecting to use it, and they've set it up that every project in Tech 1, so the finance system, that has a project code. That project code will exist over in Beacon. They update that regularly. So you can actually go in and create it for your project right at the start, because you get that code right at the start of IPP when you enter it. And then your risk, whether it be sort of the bigger high level risks of not doing the project versus doing it. And then obviously as we get through the phases, you then start to get those project delivery risks and we can record them in there. In the business case, we did have risk fields. It's kind of just a summary of what you end up in Beacon, just so we've got that data, that high level data, more for prioritisation and that sort of stuff. The records management system is ECM again. It's still ECM. All the templates are registered in ECM as a template and then we just link out. So please don't save those templates down. I highly encourage that you go to that connected site or ECM as this source of truth in case they change. Okay, we've only got a couple of more, two more concepts I think. One is approvals. We've made a really conscious effort to make really clear the difference between investment approval, budget approval and contract approval. They are three different things. We've been operating for a while now in the mode that investment approval and budget approval are one thing. And what I mean by that is when the budget gets approved, so the budget got approved today, we immediately go, what's in the budget document? Okay, I can start spending. What we're saying now is you no longer can do that. What you also need to check for is, do I have the appropriate gate approval to do that next phase of work that I have budget approved for? And there's a couple of different variations of that I'll show. So it is a bit of a change to this business, and the new people that have come from outside, that may not be new to you, but certainly is new for us here in how we go about it. So I'll give you three examples of the order that this may happen in, just to kind of cement it in. So let's say on the 1st of March this year, we got gate 4 approval. So our detailed design's done. We're now honky-dory to go construct. We have a look at the 2021 financial year budget. So this year's budget, and we have budget there. And there's budget available to start that construction phase. So we forecasted that we would start it, so there's money available. So early March, we then start the execute phase. So we then go and fill out our RFX form for contracts because we need to get a contractor. We go to a procurement team and then we get our contractor on board through the tender process and we start construction. So that's an example of, I guess, we had budget approval, we got gate approval, and then we got contract approval. So one order it could go in, and probably the most simplified order. The next example is we get that gate 4 approval, we have a look at the budget and there's no budget. So then we go to the capital portfolio working group because we need to get a budget allocation. We need to have a look at whether we can actually start this. They have a look at it and they say, yep, we've had a delay on a project, so we can keep our bottom line the same and allocate you some budget. And then we proceed and we start the execute phase, and again, the contract approvals happen as per the process. So again, the example of where we get the gate approval first and then budget second and then contract. Contract's always last. And this example is where we get gate approval, we have no budget. We go to that working group and they say, no, sorry, we can't reallocate you anything without changing that bottom line. And then there's two things that can happen. In this example, I've said, you wait, we just hold until the next budget gets adopted and then we go. Or if it's really important or something has to happen, then we might go to the systems metric modelling team and they might do a budget amendment where they actually change that bottom line for the financial year. So to try and how it work, that's our processes that would document how we're going to run with this. So the IPP is the source of truth for, is there any questions on that approval stuff? Sorry, I know I'm racing through this a bit. That is a new concept, or it's not a new concept, it's just new for how we're doing things in this business.
There might be a need to sort of give us a one-pager to say, okay, this template, that guy fills it in, this guy fills in that file, this guy, because I think although the process is relatively clear, it's not very clear who completes what.
Okay, yep.
And I think that might be necessary for us.
Yep. I think we've already got that in the business manual, but I'll double check to make sure that we've got something that captures that clearly in that kind of really simplistic one pager.
Isn't that part of the racing?
It is, but what I'm thinking, or what I took from that comment, is for each phase and gate being really clear for that element that we're doing, who's doing what, which is kind of just a subset of the racing for a particular phase and gate. The racing has the whole lot. So Tech 1 IPP is the source of truth for the business case information. The icon looks like that, that's on the screen. If you click on that, it takes you through to this page, and we're then going over to this core enterprise suite. When we click on that, you'll come to a screen, and when you find your My Workplaces, you can click on GRC Internal Project Planning Entry. That is IPP, so if you're curious of what IPP actually stood for, I always forget it.
If you don't have it in your workplace, you'll need to go to the systems modelling metrics team to get access.
Yeah. Okay, so you then, when you click on that, you then go into this screen, and you can then click on this review all IPP items, and it takes you into the register. So from this point, you can search up the top. You can search up the top there, and then click down on whatever project to then go in and get the details. So what will look different, not yet, but is coming very shortly, I've seen it, it's built in the test environment, is all the fields out of the business case will exist in there, which will, for those that have been into IPP previously, will be a change, but the look and feel is still the same. Okay, two more things in terms of future actions and what's next. So appreciate that this has been a lot of information, and I did have, and it is the first of what will be many, I guess, shares of information as part of this implementation. And that kind of ties into that monitor and approve IDF and the PMF, and also how we use the capital portfolio. So on Connected, there are forms that you can fill out to provide improvement ideas, and then the teams will then review and look at that of how we can improve. If there's areas you're struggling with in terms of not, the suggestions around the one pager or whatever that would make things easiest, let us know so that we can put that in place and make it. The point of this is that we have a disciplined approach. It's not an opt-in or opt-out. It's this, the business is saying you must use this. So if it's not working, tell us so we can make it work. The corporate standard will be reviewed in 12 months. Rather than the normal 3-year cycle. Operational investments will come online, so we'll work with how that looks and what they use and all that, and effectively do an implementation phase for them.
IPP data cleanse. So this is one that probably a lot are quite interested in because it takes up a lot of time and pain for us every year the last few years. So we understand that in IPP there is a lot of legacy projects that exist, and we're not confident that they're all needed either. And they certainly don't have the level of detail that we're expecting through the IDF. So we are working through an approach at the moment of how we do that data cleanse so that we have confidence in what's in there, and we're able to then really do a lot more strategic planning around that 10-year view. I'm putting that together at the moment. I've just gone through all the data, and there's 2,000 line items in the IPP currently. Of that, only 800 is actual work.
I picked up quite a lot of duplications as well.
And duplications, yeah. So there's a bit of a clean process we've got to go through with that. So in terms of what's going to be handover of what I'm doing is there'll be minimum fields on every project that will be filled out, like what's the category, what phase is it up to. So there's some minimum data to help us start. And then over the next 6 months, there'll be an approach or doing a version of this data cleanse. And then there's every year we've then got to do a review of those year 4 projects that come into 3. So there's multiple aspects of that data cleanse. We're putting that approach together at the moment. Prioritisation model, I'll make no secret of the fact that we still haven't landed that. We're still using the same one we had in previous years, and it's an element of IDF that is coming in a future piece of work around how do we prioritise better, not only in the capital portfolio, but on that 10-year view as well.
Currently based on risk.
Currently it's based on risk and those 4 categories. There's 4 categories we rate those projects, yeah. And also, it's also based on whether it's driven by a renewal or council resolution versus just a new or upgrade. So that comes into it as well. Benefits realisation is another area that's new for this business that we're improving in, and we have a template at least to start with, so to help us, but there's heaps of work happening in that space in the future to help us actually first record what we think the benefits are going to be and then assess them to make sure we have what we spent our money on has got the benefit we expected to get. So we're not quite there in that space. Okay, so what's next immediately for you? Have I got an opportunity for you? Would you like to be an IDF champion? And that is a really genuine question. If the IDF champions, the purpose of them is really to be the people that are passionate about this or get it and are willing to help and mentor others so others get it. My vision is that everyone becomes an IDF champion because this is not optional. This is the way we do investment decisions. So eventually we will all be champions, but appreciate that this is new. So we're going to have to just help each other through this. So if you are really keen about making this succeed and seeing this succeed, can you email me through? I think, yes, we need more practice. Absolutely. Absolutely. Practice makes perfect. But if you want to become an IDF champion straight away, please email me. We've got another session we're going to run specifically around that. It's not time intensive. It's really just about being a support and setting up that support for others. And also helping with assess where people put forward proposed changes, just having a look at, well, what does that mean and is that a good change? So email me if you want to be a part of that. I've had a couple already email through. The project team will be IDF champions as well as the Investment Opportunity Committee. So we've got a few, but the more we have widespread, the better off we're going to be.
We go live 1st of July for capital, and any feedback, improvement, ideas by connected on the forum. And start using it and we'll see where we go. That's all we can do. So that's all from me. Are there any questions or comments from anyone? No, none in here. Anything online? Are you still all with us?
Yeah, we're here.
There's one guy.
No, it's all really good, Salisa. It's great. It's great to see it coming together.
Right, I've just got one question here. What is it? Hang on. Janine, is it worth jumping into IPP to see the project set for 21-22? IPP hasn't quite been updated yet with the budget stuff, so we won't actually see it in the budget in IPP yet.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yep, correct. We'll send out a notification once it's up to date.
Yeah, so there we had what is showing in IPP now, Janine, may not be
The endorsed budget.
the endorsed budget. Because we had a fair bit of shift of stuff moving out from 21-22 into the future, the future years. So you will see a version. It's not the adopted version, but
if anyone needs a copy of that though, please send an email to the asset governance team or myself, and we can get you a copy. Or Denisa or Rachel in Works Planning and Scheduling should also be able to assist.
any other questions? Can we use it for a current project? What do you mean by that, Bruce? Just what do you mean, can we use it? Use IDF?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just thought a project that we're just starting, can we use the structure to manage our project now?
Yep. Start it. I reckon we're close enough to 1st of July.
Yeah, I can just see the benefits in it 100%, and I'd like to jump in sooner rather than later.
Yep. Everything's on connected. So yeah, we just might need, if you get a little bit stuck, come and see us and we'll work through it. So yeah, start with your investment opportunity brief, Bruce. Any others? Carmen, well, you're a good test bunny straight up. So yeah, investment opportunity brief and go from there. The GMs and leaders have all had their sessions, and we had really good attendance to those sessions, which shows, I guess, well, from mine, not only did I put on training for a good reason, everyone showed up, but also how, I guess, invested they are at making this work. So they play an integral part in this as well. So when you take your investment brief to your line manager, they should know what you're talking about, what they have to do. If not, we'll help you. Okay, any other questions, comments? No, this is recorded, so we'll get up onto Connected, this recording, ASAP as well, and try and put some bookmarks in it, so if you need to click to a particular section, you can go to it rather than the whole thing. Yep. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was good.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, Lisa. See ya.